the people in power, whether red or blue, they could not care less about Texas, me and you. They created this give me country that don't value hard work. For a Texan to survive, all we need are some seeds and dirt. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country, for it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country, for it's long gone. We believe in family and we value our community. Gladly lend a helping hand to a neighbor in need. And we don't believe that government should provide for all of society's needs. No, it's the pride of a Texan to give to others voluntarily. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Gotta save your country, for it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country, for it's long gone. They like our tax dollars and they love our natural resources. But they don't want to see us driving trucks, they'd rather see us riding horses. And now they want to ban our guns, you know, especially the ones that look scary. But may I remind you of the Gonzales Cannon and the Alamo heroes we buried. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save our country, for it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save our country, for it's long gone. This last verse is straight from the Texas Constitution, Article 1, Section 1 and 2. Look it up. Texas is an independent state, yet presently we suffer. We no longer possess the right to locally self-govern. And now it's time as a people in which all political power is inherent. And in such manner we find expedient, we reform or abolish our government. I said, Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country, for it's long gone. Texan rise, don't you hear your call? Got to save your country, for it's long gone.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's time for some late night coffee talk. I am with you now. I'm Daniel Miller, for those of you who do not know. And this is when I get an opportunity to take a break in the evening and, once a week, just kind of have a little decompress. Talk about things that are vitally important to you, to Texas, to me, to whatever. And so, tonight has been kind of interesting, right? We started off with technical issues. what can you do? So apologies for that. I don't know what I'm apologizing for. It was not my fault. If it's my fault, I'll apologize, right? But anyway, look, thank you so much for joining. Hope you got your cup of coffee. Excuse me. Wow. Welcome to allergy season in Texas. Anyway, got a lot to talk about tonight. But before we get to talking about just one short story from the conventions a couple of weekends ago, and talking about Greg Abbott's press conference today, a quick reminder, if you are watching on either the TNM's YouTube channel or my YouTube channel, please click on like and subscribe, and be sure to hit that notification bell so you can get notified every time we go live. And of course, on both channels, chat is active, but on the TNM YouTube channel, Super Chat's active. So if you would like to be so kind as to drop some coin in, it goes straight to the work of the TNM and help us get the message of Texas independence out to the masses. It is more important than ever. And we're going to talk about some of the reasons why that is tonight. And of course, if you're watching on any of the Facebook pages, be sure to like, comment, and share. Like, comment, share. Help us beat the algorithm. And it makes sure that makes it a little more possible for you to see our posts and communicate. And of course, if you're on Twitter or any of these other things, follow, do those things. And of course, retweet this on Twitter and, whatever. We're on a bunch of different platforms now. If I spent time telling you what to do on all of them at the beginning of the program, I would be here for 20 minutes. And I'm not going to consume 20 minutes over telling you how to share on social media. You already know how to do that. So go do that. It helps. Trust me, it helps. So go do that. If you don't do anything else to help the cause, at least do that. It's like literally the move of a finger. So do that. All right. Wow. I mean, tearing off into it tonight. We're a little bit late because, as I said, we had technical difficulties. It's been a really weird evening here at the Casa. It's been unusual. We had a power outage and follow that up with these weird technical issues that we just had. It's just another day at the office, right? Well, let me do this. Before I rip into the Greg Abbott border press conference, because I've got a lot to say about that. I will talk about the conventions. And a reminder, if you are chatting on YouTube or Facebook, or any of those, then drop us a note. And if we can get to your questions by the end of this, we'll definitely do that. Kara's running production tonight, so she's running triage. Be sure, everyone, to tell her hello and just tell her howdy. She does great. She does great work. She doesn't just do production here. She's operations for the organization. So she handles an awful lot. Of course, all of our leadership in the TNM do. I mean, you got to love that. Well, I want to share this with you just to kind of kick off a little bit and set the tone for tonight. I got an email in. I guess it was 3 days ago, from Joshua, who attended the McLennan County Republican Party convention. And he was, he had been one of the ones, if you guys recall on that when the coffee talk I did before, I encourage you to look, if you needed the cheat sheet for Robert's Rules of Order, I'll go ahead and send it to you. Just drop me an email. So I did that. So he was one of the ones who got it. But this is the part of the email that I wanted to share with you guys. And I can't put it on the screen, so I'll just have to read it off, and if you'll forgive me. It says, I would like to thank you for doing this, as the resolution probably could not have passed in our county without the cheat sheet. It allowed me to know how to navigate the session. When the resolution was first read aloud, grumbles were audible, right? Our opposition's vocal. We know that. The resolution went to debate. And since I had familiarized myself using your cheat sheet, I was confident enough to go up and be the first person to voice my support for the resolution. When I said that the resolution is just asking for a vote, you could feel the convention coming around to the resolution. I ended my piece by saying that the resolution would send a message to Washington that we're serious when it comes to protecting our freedoms. This prompted an outspoken opponent of the resolution to blurt out of turn, that we already have freedom. Surely a mistake in a room full of Republicans during the COVID era. Another delegate who went up to speak in support of the resolution told me after the convention that she was only able to do so because I had been the first one to speak for it, that she wouldn't have been able to speak for it for fear that doing so would be too taboo. Your cheat sheet gave me the confidence to give others the confidence to speak for the resolution. The resolution passed in our county 530 to 300. Okay. And so, I asked Joshua if I could share that with you guys on Coffee Talk, because to me, it is the perfect example of what we have been saying for many, many years. Not just on Coffee Talk, but everywhere else, is there are so many people out there that are harboring this sentiment that the opposition's main play has been to make it seem kind of out there and taboo. And it's always been the thing. It's like, look, if people just realized that there were other people out there in the numbers that we know that they exist, then they would be willing to stand up and speak up and do the things necessary to make Texas independence a reality, right? And so our encouragement has been to be the one that exhibits the courage to stand up, even if it's something uncomfortable, right? Something you may have never done before in your life. Stand up and be the example for other people. And I often cite this example of our wonderful volunteers when they were out doing flag waves, right? And I can remember one story that happened, and I want to say that it was out toward West Texas. But they were out doing a flag wave in an area that was, not heavily trafficked, right? But there were still cars. And this minivan passed by, turned around, slammed on the brakes, turned around, came back, and the woman bounded out of the minivan with tears in her eyes. And she said, "Is this what I think it is?" And they said to her, "Yes, we want Texas to be independent." And she said, "I've been looking for you guys my entire life," right? So be that example. Be that leadership example. Don't ever tell me that you can't be a leader, right? Sometimes leading is just stepping up, standing up, speaking up, showing up, right? So that, and being unapologetic and unafraid that you are Texas first, that you are pro-Texas, you're pro-self-government. So be that person, right? Be that person that steps up and does that. And this would be a good time. This will make Paul Roby so happy when I do this. Now would be a good time to be like Joshua and become a volunteer in the TNM. Head over to tnm.me/volunteer. That's tnm.me/volunteer. Well, let's move right along. Before I get to any questions or your comments, we got to move on to talk about Greg Abbott's press conference today. Okay. Now, in all fairness, we were given a heads up on that press conference was going down, and some of what the content of that press conference would be, because we have a well-placed source within Greg Abbott's camp. So we knew what was coming, or at least we suspected. We knew generally what was coming. And the anticipation was that it was going to be something a little stronger than what we got. Okay. Now, I'm not going to play the entire press conference for you. That's available if you want to go sit through that. His speaking delivery drives me nuts. It pains me. It pains me to listen to it for extended periods of time. Look, no slide on him. Just his delivery. It's like when, I don't know if you guys remember Sandy Berger in the Clinton administration. When I would hear that guy on TV or C-SPAN or whatever back in the day, I got this negative physiological reaction to it. Just listening to that guy drove me nuts. And Abbott's delivery is kind of the same way, and whatever. But as I was listening to the press conference, something right out of the gate jumped out at me to the point that I jumped up from my chair, ran into Kara's office screaming, "Oh my God, they stole my idea." Here it is.
Second, to help local officials whose communities are being overwhelmed by hordes of illegal immigrants who are being dropped off by the Biden administration, Texas is providing charter buses to send these illegal immigrants who have been dropped off by the Biden administration to Washington, D.C. We are sending them to the United States Capitol, where the Biden administration will be able to more immediately address the needs of the people that they are allowing to come across our border.
So there were two other things that went along with it, right? With his announcements, and I'll talk about those two. First one was enhanced inspections for commercial traffic coming across the border from Mexico, which we can talk about the impacts of that. There was this, and then there was this. Well, I'll talk about the third thing later, because it really delivered my favorite line of the entire press conference. But let me show you this. So mark your calendars, right? Today is April the 6th, 2022. For those of you in the future watching this, it's April 6th, 2022. But on June 7th, 2010, the T&M actually had its own press release that we sent out, and here it is. Here we go. June 7th, 2010. T&M offering free bus fare for illegal aliens all the way to Washington, D.C. In fact, here's the entire text of the press release. It's still on our website, right? It may be one of the oldest articles on the website, because, we've gone through many editions since 2010, obviously. But I mean, listen, here's a quote directly from me. We figured that if Washington suddenly has to deal with a few thousand illegal aliens trashing the District of Columbia, driving down wages, murdering, raping, and killing DC citizens, that maybe the federal government might sit up and take notice. This is 2010, right? And this was really in response to what was happening in 2010 with something called the Alien Transfer and Exit Program. Okay. Now, you may not be aware, you may have never heard of the Alien Transfer and Exit Program, but back during the Obama administration, it was a protocol or plan that was being run by the federal government that effectively took thousands upon thousands of illegal aliens that were interdicted in California, in Arizona, and New Mexico, and put them on buses, then ship them all the way to Presidio, Texas, and dump them out at the border at an exit station. Okay. So they were literally pulling the buses up, spilling them out at the international bridge, and pointing to Mexico and saying, "See you later." Right. So all of a sudden now we're talking about tens of thousands of illegal aliens that were being shipped from other states, dumped into Texas, into little bitty Presidio, Texas, right? Being pointed, having Mexico, having them redirected to Mexico. And then if you look at what's on the other side of that bridge, it's the Chihuahuan Desert, right? So you don't get a lot, you're not going to get very far on foot. So what would happen is they were dumping about, and I think the total was like 35,000 a week or whatever. I mean, it was 2010, right? So they were dumping out, tens of thousands of these illegal aliens in Presidio, Texas. And because there was nowhere for these guys to get to, they had no transportation on the other side, they would essentially camp out right on the other side of the border. And then within a day or two, they will have walked 5, 10, 15 miles down the border and snuck back across. So all of a sudden, all of these tens of thousands of illegal aliens that were taken from other states were dumped in Presidio, Texas, and re-entering there with no resources, no nothing. And of course, as usual, the federal government did what they do where the border is concerned and just said, well, to hell with you, Texas. Choke on it. That's what the entire plan was designed to do anyway. Before we even made this offer at the time, we had already called on the governor to deploy DPS and Texas Rangers on the interstate to stop the buses, right? To literally stop them at the border and turn them away. And I'm not talking about the border with Mexico. I'm talking about the federal buses, bringing them from the other states and turn them around, right? So obviously that didn't happen. So we get to 2010 and it's like, okay, well, if this is the way that it's going to be, let's just pack them up on buses. Let's send them to DC. Let's go ahead and get them because, you know, at the time the jails were filled up. And again, this is one of the things I talked about during the recent campaign for lieutenant governor. This border thing didn't just pop up. We've been on this issue since our inception because a very fundamental concept of a self-governing nation state is that it must have borders. And if your border is lawless and fuzzy, right, and given away to somebody else, then you don't have a nation. And let's be honest, these people are globalists. They have a disdain for even the very concept of a nation state, right? Much like they don't care for a constitutional Republican form of government, they despise the concept of a nation state altogether, right? They fundamentally despise it. They're just, you know, that's Marxism, globalism. It's all sort of the same thing. So this is what we did. And, you know, and one of the quotes in here, which I thought was pretty funny because we obviously talked about, you know, sending them to DC, was that because MSNBC was on such a kick, you know, saying that there was no border crisis. This is what I said in the press release too. We may later expand the end destination to include the MSNBC studios in New York too. Right. You know, so this was something matter is that, you know, so this is something we were already talking about. And of course, the fact of the matter is that, no one ever took us up on it. Right. It was to prove a point. You know, we had donors ready, lined up to underwrite the project. But of course they never did, but it was to effectively prove a point. And that point was proven because I did dozens of media interviews about this thing. And it allowed us to talk about the alien transfer and exit program. It allowed us to talk about how the federal government was destroying the sovereignty of Texas. And more importantly, it allowed us to talk about the fact that the only way Texans are ever going to get control of their immigration and border policy is to become a self-governing independent nation again, right? That's the only way you get control of those things. So this was, you know, that's what we said. So 12 years. So 12 years later, Governor Greg Abbott sends out the word. He's going to have this big press conference and he's going to do three things. And it's going to be and I mean, they were hyping this up. I mean, this was going to be the speech of all speeches. He was going to be so tough on the border. And so I'm going to tell you what many of us were anticipating. Now, I wouldn't say we were anticipating. We thought it might happen, right? Perhaps that he had engaged in polling, right? Found out where the Texas electorate is. Perhaps he finally realized that his job as governor of Texas is to serve the people of Texas and not bow and scrape at the foot of the federal government. You know, there was some thought that just beyond all odds that maybe he would invoke Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution. Right? Something that Don Huffines pressured him on during the primaries, that he would say, look, the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a Republican form of government. And here's the key phrase, the phrase that pays, and shall protect each of them against invasion. Right? So the thought is that perhaps Greg Abbott had maybe seen the light. And was going to get ready to declare an invasion. I mean, look at it. I mean, Huffines pressured him into adopting positions that he previously would not touch with a 10-foot pole. And, you know, the excitement for me came when the thought would be that he would declare an invasion and adopt mine and the T&M's border security plan, which involved full militarization of the Texas State Guard so they couldn't be federalized and all that, right? But that's not what happened. Right. What we got was busing to DC, which I get it. It's funny, right? It's an opportunity. And, you know, sometimes it's people on our side have a tendency to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Right. But there is some benefit to it. That, you think about it, that perhaps all of these illegal aliens that are filling the jails in our counties could be instead put on a bus and transported and dumped out at the U.S. Capitol. I mean, that's phenomenal. Except for one thing. And it was not made obvious during the press conference, but it came out in a statement later that during the Q&A, the reporter Q&A at the end of it, when pressed on the issue, Abbott admitted that the bus ride would be completely voluntary. So they got to stick their hand in the air and say, yeah, I'll get on the bus, whatever. Now, granted, they could, even though it's voluntary, they could entice them. Hey, we're going to have a movie, right? We're going to be playing movies on the bus. Maybe, the way that the state loves to spend money on companies that hate what we're about here in Texas, maybe they'll just get a contract with Disney. Maybe Disney can subsidize and show them movies right on the bus. Maybe some in the middle of the ride cocktails, right? Whatever it is, maybe they can entice them. Say, look, you're going to stay in this jail and face whatever trespass charge you're dealing with, or you get on the bus, right? There's incentives, there's enticement. Or maybe they won't. But the fact of the matter is that the bus thing only works from a state of Texas perspective if it's not voluntary. Now, granted, we're an independent organization, right? We're complete NGO, so it's donor money. We had donations lined up for this, so it had to be voluntary, right? We can't force anybody to get on a bus, but ones that are interdicted and in the custody of the state, why would it be voluntary? Why would it be voluntary? If you have apprehended them in the middle of committing a crime, which is crossing the border illegally, and you have them apprehended and in custody, what part of that says you get a say in where you go? So it's quite interesting, conceptually speaking, but again, weak. Because you see, he could have, again, invoked Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, Article 1, Section 10, right, where the state is allowed to repel invasions. He could have come out and said it's an invasion. Today could have been the day that Greg Abbott came out and said, this is an invasion. I am declaring it as such, and therefore, in my authority under the Texas Constitution, Article 4, Section 7, as Commander-in-Chief of the Texas Military Forces, I am now going to call forth the militia to execute the laws of the state and to suppress insurrections and to repel invasions. He could have invoked his constitutional power. But we got buses. We didn't get a declaration of an invasion. We got bus rides. We got vehicle inspections. And we got more personnel. Okay, but more of the same personnel under the same command structure and with the same, the same sort of failed plan of execution. What did we get? All of this hype over, we're going to do some border security, and we got vehicle inspections, bus tickets, and more of the same. And I loved it, right? I loved watching this because it just, let me rephrase. I hated it and I loved it. I hated it because I want our border secure. But I loved it because all of these people that we just had to deal with during the election cycle who thought that Abbott and Patrick had secured the border, right? They went around promising everybody the border was secure. Then why are they having to do anything at all? Why are they having to do it? If it was secure, if Greg Abbott had done what he said he did on the campaign trail, then why was today necessary? If Dan Patrick had done what he said he did on the campaign trail, then why was today necessary? And the other thing he said, look, hey, we're going to finish the wall. We knew that. We're going to talk about the wall. We're going to put cargo containers down there. We knew about that, the janky wall, right? And then he said that they were going to put lights down there.
Region is going to be lit.
Now, I will confess, when he said the border region was going to be lit and he phrased it that way, I had a completely different concept. What came to mind for me was something completely different.
Region is going to be lit.
Light up the blaze, go! Get hit with it. What you get with it?
Yeah, I'm not sure if what he was saying was in fact meant to deter illegal immigration or was a tourism ad for the Rio Grande Valley. I guess it depends on which generation you're from. If you're kind of below 35, then, or 40 or below, you probably understand lit to mean a great time, right? But if you're old, so I guess it depends on where you fall on the age spectrum. But anyway, I digress. So we could have had something strong. And what we got was something kind of interesting, basically do what the DPS is already doing, but more of it. A 12-year-old plan mined from the bowels of the T&M news archives and some cargo containers and a tourism ad for the Rio Grande Valley. Unbelievable. But here's what I want you to know. This, yet again, proves why Texas needs new leadership. Now, if you will recall, after the Snowpocalypse 2021, we released an article, a statement from the T&M, talking about why the federal government and people here in Texas, leadership here in Texas, and I hesitate to call them leadership, but officials here in Texas were responsible for Texans freezing to death, right? And there was already discussion about the grid, right? I mean, we talked about that, but one aspect that we keyed in on was the state of Texas having to ask permission to buy power from other people. And it had to do with green energy subsidies and all this kind of, and you go back in the archives and read it. But man, we got so much hate mail. I was called a liar more than when we slammed Patrick and Abbott over their red flag laws for guns, right? I mean, I got so much hate mail over that one. People swearing up and down that, we were just propagandists and Beto supporters in disguise, which is really kind of laughable, right? But it was borne out to be true, right? We produced all the documents, all the PDFs. It was all there, all documented. For some people, that doesn't make a difference. But it was part of a long string of incidents where the best interests of Texans have taken a back seat to going and begging for scraps from the master's table, right? And oddly enough, during that press conference, I heard some of the same thing, right? So when people want to know, well, why don't you just go down there? Why doesn't Abbott declare that this is an invasion? Well, that's an Abbott thing. Why do you people keep electing a guy who won't call it an invasion, right? Why is it that they're only on Texas property? They won't go belly up to the border. Well, here's your answer.
Well, first, they're not going to be on federal property. They won't be on the bridges where the Office of Field Operation operates. Where we've not even asked for permission to be able to operate there.
Did you catch that? We've not even asked for permission to operate there. That's coming from the head of the Texas Department of Public Safety. If Texas is under invasion, Texas is under threat, then why are we having to ask, why are Texas officials, appointed or elected, asking the federal government for permission for anything? I mean, if it was the Russian army or the Chinese army, right, or somebody down there crossing the border, would these Texas officials stop? Well, I don't know that I can do anything. I got to ask for permission from the federal government. Start looking at it that way, because that's what the cartels effectively are, right? They are an invasion force in the era of asymmetric warfare. Normally, we think about asymmetric warfare in terms of an invading force being repelled by people, non-state actors, engaging in asymmetric warfare, right? We saw it in Iraq. We saw it in Afghanistan. I mean, you see it. I mean, this is the age of asymmetric warfare. And this is the flip side of that. What's happening on the border is the flip side of that. You have non-state actors, and probably some state actors, that are encouraging and facilitating this. And I think an argument could be made that the federal government is facilitating this, right? But in a sense that I think everyone can agree on, you have non-state actors that are utilizing under force of arms through the cartels, utilizing mass civil disobedience on the border to affect an invasion, to affect political change in Texas and the rest of the United States. So it is, by definition, an invasion, especially so in the age of asymmetric warfare. So, permission? Why are we asking permission for anything? Why is there any dialogue? Let's be honest. Why is there any dialogue with the federal government, period, over this issue? They have failed, and they have abrogated their responsibility, right? And this was, honestly, out of everything, while as much as I loved the lit line, this is the one that sent me into orbit.
Securing the border does not come cheap. Securing the border would cost Texas nothing if the federal government was doing its job. But because Joe Biden is not securing the border, the state of Texas is having to step up and spend Texas taxpayer money doing the federal government's job. Texans have the backbone and the will to secure a border, two things that Joe Biden does not have.
I could sit here for a minute, but let me just take a drink of coffee. I want you to think about what he just said. And I want you to see it from my perspective, right? Because I have a perspective, you'll have your own. But number one is the question the reporter asked was about where the money for this is going to come from. So point number one thing that should get your blood boiling. We're going to take it chronologically. Number one is he said it. He said securing the border is not cheap. But then he said Texas wouldn't have to spend a thing. Texas wouldn't have to spend a thing if the federal government was doing its job. Well, understand something, Greg. While the state of Texas would have to spend nothing, currently Texans that are paying federal income tax, and even people that aren't, because you're going to be saddled with the debt too, as with future generations, we're paying for it. We're paying for it. It's like going through the drive-through at a drive-through restaurant, and you pull out of the parking lot. You get to the house, you open the bag, and your food's not there. You got a bag of plastic forks and napkins, right? Man, that makes me mad. And if that makes me mad, if that makes you mad, then why isn't the border driving you just apoplectic? Why is the border not driving you apoplectic? You should be furious. Because there he is admitting that the federal government is stealing money from us and not delivering on their fundamental constitutional duties. Right? Remember, the federal government's only supposed to do a few things. Now, they do way more than that. So, effectively, what's happening is they're not doing what they're supposed to do, and they're doing a bunch of crap they're not supposed to do. So, when we talk about how Texas overpays somewhere between $103 to $160 billion annually on average into the federal system, that's money that goes away. That comes out of my pocket, your pocket, everybody else. It comes out of your kids' mouths, right? And it's going up there to that abyss, that black hole in Washington, D.C., and your border's still unsecure. And we are on the edge, right on the cusp, with the repeal of those Title 42 issues from the Biden administration. There was a mass influx. On the campaign trail, I talked about how 165,000 illegal aliens are crossing the border every single solitary month. That number, friends, is probably about to double, if not triple or quadruple. And we got vehicle inspections, buses, and more of the same. So, that's point one, chronologically, right? But point two, he said that the federal government is not doing its job. He says it's not doing its job. Now, we're not talking about not delivering your mail on time, right? Like, your mail's late. Or you talk to somebody with a really crappy attitude when you call some government agency. We're talking about a fundamental constitutional duty. Fundamental. Like, out of all the few things the federal government is supposed to do, it is one of those few things. And it's not that they're failing at it, they are refusing to do it. And so Abbott calls it out. He straight up says they're not doing their job. They're not doing what they're supposed to do. One of the entire reasons the union exists in the first place. And then, buses. It's at moments like this in history where you can tell what someone is made of. Right? I mean, these are pivot points, right? It's a historical nexus. It's an opportunity, right, for people to show their character and show what they're made of. And so, rather than saying the federal government is failing to protect Texas from an invasion, as is their responsibility, so therefore we are going to deploy the buses, Greg Abbott could have said, and should have said, the federal government is failing to do its job to protect Texas against an invasion, and therefore, in my power as governor, I will do two things. Number one, as of this moment, it is now an invasion. I am hereby calling up all the forces, all the forces of the Texas Military Department, and I am ordering the Texas State Guard to recruit as many combat veterans as they possibly can and engage in readiness. I am also calling forth volunteers to join the county sheriffs in a citizen militia attached to the counties. And as of today, we are going to repel the invasion. And the second thing is I am calling on the legislature. I am calling on a special session of the legislature to commence in the next 3 days for the purposes of drafting legislation to put the issue of Texas independence to a vote of the people of Texas. Because if the federal government can't carry out its basic functions, then it is incumbent upon us as elected representatives of the people of Texas to give them an opportunity, to give them the chance to reclaim their right of self-government. You see, that's what a proper governor would do. A proper representative of the people of Texas. And number 3, he said that Texans have spine. And he accused Joe Biden of not having spine, not having a backbone, not having the will, not being tough, right? But what he fails to understand, or maybe he does, I don't know. But what he fails to understand probably is that they're doing exactly what they said they were going to do. They're operating their playbook. It's our electeds that are not showing the willpower and the backbone and the intestinal fortitude and the courage of the people that created Texas. It's our people, Greg Abbott included, that have effectively shown for the world that our leadership here is weak. And it is unacceptable. Elections have consequences, my friends. They have consequences. But it's never too late to turn the tide. Because, you know, the fact of the matter is, as much as Abbott was pressured to even go this far, to do this, he can be pushed the rest of the way. It takes the people. Now, as the people, we had an opportunity. We had a clear opportunity. March the 1st, 2022, we had an opportunity to flush that commode in Austin, Texas, let the weakness leave the body, and to put strong leadership in. And the people of Texas did not take it. Okay? But it's never too late. While this election cycle may have come and gone, the fact of the matter is that the battle is not over. Because we don't curl up in a ball. We don't suck our thumb, cry and whine about it. We get out and we do something about it, right? You know, that's what the opposition's doing. They're working their game plan, right? We're working our game plan. Greg Abbott, I don't know what he's doing. You know, maybe we might need to check, see if Dan Patrick bought stock in a charter bus company. You know, that might be worth some research, somebody. And, you know, again, we have Greg Abbott cutting tourism ads for the Rio Grande Valley.
Region is going to be lit.
Light up the blaze, go! Get hit with it. What you get with it.
Unreal.